I think you've heard a lot of people here talking about holding the feet to the fire of our representatives in Washington. This is a representative republic. This is not a democracy. These people are elected. They're supposed to represent the wishes of their district. They do not. And it is very important. This is irrespective of party. Partisan politics is something thrown out to voters to keep them ignorant. They keep these little things going back and forth. So I'd like to start with an appropriate Tea Party quote by Charles A. Beard. You need only reflect that one of the best ways to get yourself a reputation as a dangerous citizen these days is to go about repeating the very phrases which our founding fathers used in the struggle for independence. As we go through this year of fascist campaigning by partisan politicians, there are some key realities that we must consider. We cannot be taken in by this partisan politics and believe one side of a story just because we know the other side to be a lie. We must check the facts of both sides. A fine example of political double talk is the various budget plans currently in front of Congress. Barack Obama submitted his proposed fiscal year 2013 budget to Congress at the end of February. With its huge tax increases and built-in trillion-dollar deficits, it was dead on arrival at Congress. At the end of March, the Republican-controlled House Committee on the Budget submitted its own budget plan, known as the Ryan budget. Then the Democratic minority on the House Committee on the Budget introduced their own budget plan in the form of an amendment to the Republican plan. There's a tremendous amount of partisan rhetoric about these competing budgets, with the Democrats calling the Republicans heartless and the Republicans calling the Democrats insane. The truth about these budgets is stranger still. Let's look at the Republican alternative and see if it really is an improvement over the Democrats' roadmap to ruin. Congressional Republicans have given their plan an impressive name: the Path to Prosperity budget. Your country, your future, your choice. Unfortunately, when you examine the Ryan budget, you'll find out that it's nearly identical to the Democrats' plan. The actual spending difference is less than 5%. The Ryan Path to Prosperity is not a blueprint for American renewal. It is bloated, fiscally irresponsible, and makes a mockery of the Constitution. This blueprint, although it claims to be, quote, committed to the timeless principles enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, liberty, limited government, and equality under the rule of law, is just a big government Republican path to the welfare warfare state instead of a big government Democratic one. Ryan's budget includes a first-year deficit of $833 billion and plans on increasing the national debt from $16.4 trillion to $21.6 trillion in 10 years. What kind of lunatics plan to add $5 trillion to the debt in 10 years? Big government politicians do. To be fair, this is better than the budget Ryan released last year. That one increased the national debt by $8.5 trillion in 10 years. At least this one's only $5 trillion of debt increase. It looks like George Wallace was right when he said there wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the Republicans and Democrats in Washington. Oddly, there's another Republican budget that hasn't gotten much press. This budget is a balanced budget that brings spending below the historical average of 19.6% of GDP in the first year. Based on the current CBO baseline, this budget would spend $8 trillion less over the next 10 years. It reduces spending by nearly $11 trillion relative to the president's budget. It actually pays off $2 trillion of national debt in 10 years instead of increasing it by $5 trillion like Ryan's plan. This is the budget put forth by the Tea Party Republicans, Rand Paul of Kentucky, Jim DeMint of South Carolina, and Mike Lee of Utah. All this proves that we must be ever vigilant and not expect the truth from Washington Republicans just because they're not Democrats. Educating others about the truth of what is happening in our republic today is the duty of the Tea Party patriots. Be sure to push your representatives for a balanced budget at every opportunity. And be sure to ask those you see here today running for Congress from Connecticut, not what cabinet expenses will be cut, but what cabinet departments will be eliminated. As Samuel Adams said, it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting fresh fires of freedom in the minds of men. Banking cartel known as the Federal Reserve and big government politicians get together to steal the wealth of Americans. The Federal Reserve exists for one purpose and one purpose only: to enrich those private bankers who own it. The way they do that is they make a deal with big government politicians, and the deal is, we will let you issue all the debt you want. You can print all the money you want. You can pretend to borrow money all you want. And what most people will never realize, that inflation is a tax. Inflation only exists because we have a fiat money supply, and for those who are not familiar with the word fiat, it means it's a piece of paper, just like Chris showed that little picture of Dodd on a $100 bill. This picture of George Washington on the $1 bill, honestly, folks, it's worth the same amount of money as the one with Dodd. It's worth nothing. It is not money. It doesn't say it's on money on here. What it is it's known as legal tender. And the reason that governments pass legal tender laws is so they can debauch and inflate your currency. And remember, people, inflation is a tax. When they tell you it's 4% inflation, that's a 4% tax you just paid on every penny you have. That's an astounding number. The tax they collect in inflation every year is more than you can get at our hometown bank. You can't get that rate. They're stealing your money. You have to stop them. When the government issues bonds, a bond is a promise to tax somebody else because you don't want to pay the bill. That's what it is. A bond makes my granddaughter pay for things that people who are voting today don't want to pay for. People, if it's a good idea, the government should save the money and do it. And if we're willing to put our money up for good causes and save the money, then it means it's a worthwhile cause. Any cause you have to borrow money for is a bad cause, because it means that the people who are doing the bonding don't have the morality to pay for it themselves. So let's put a stop to the Federal Reserve when we get in there. They have to be put down, and we have to get back to a gold-backed money supply. I mean, gasoline prices, everybody knows about that. They're up there. We say things like we need the Keystone Pipeline and we need to do more drilling, and yes, all those things will help. But I have not met one person that I have talked to who understands who the real culprit is. Gasoline prices, believe it or not, are at 82% of their historic levels. And you say, how can that be? Because if you measure them in grains of gold, that's what they are. So that's the real price of gasoline, is the cheapest in our lifetime, yet the price at the pump we're paying is outrageous. That is inflation, folks. That's every big government politician in Washington stealing your money. So keep that in mind when you go to the polls. Question these candidates aggressively on what they're going to do for our financial plan to get us back on a firm dollar. Otherwise, we'll be going with the yuan as our currency, because that's where we're heading, folks. Thanks.